Greetings, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and right now I propose to all of you to watch this video review on Ukrainian battle map situation as of July the 22nd of July. So join and watch this video, like it, share it. Don't forget to subscribe and also leave your comments below the video. Today I'll start with the reviewing of maybe the most crucial and critical zone of the battleground, that's Pokrovsk region. So let's begin with overview what is going on and why it's so critical right now. Let's start with Pokrovsk. What's happening in this agglomeration? Well, first of all, there is some advancement here. Recently, we can observe changes on the deep state map, particularly in the areas of Novoekonomishne, Myrnohrad, and Malinivka. The enemy is pressing in from the east, the enemy is pressing in from the south, near the Shevchenko and Pishan districts, especially the settlement of Zvirov. You can see a rather wide gray zone has appeared here, and in fact, the area of Zvirov and Pershetravnya is exactly the direction from which the Russians, in the form of sabotage and reconnaissance groups, entered Pokrovsk over the weekend. Deep state analysts claim that the process of catching enemy sabotage groups is still ongoing. The official information states that the enemy's sabotage and reconnaissance groups have been eliminated. Another interesting point that Deep State actually mentions is that somehow it happened that the public was informed about the enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups entering Pokrovsk, and this really did correspond to reality. By the way, in one of the videos from our soldiers, you can actually see them coming across such a checkpoint, an ambush set up by an enemy sabotage group right on the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk. We can watch this video without any commentary. Let's take a look at it first. Afterwards, I'll share an interesting and unfortunately unpleasant fact that deep state analysts have also pointed out, knowing the situation from the inside regarding what happened with this infiltration by the sabotage and reconnaissance group. In other words, this did cause a certain destabilization of the situation there, even though the overall situation hasn't changed significantly. Let's start like this. Let's watch the video without any commentary, showing how our group of fighters unfortunately walked into an ambush. Thank God, as far as I understand, everyone survived, but still it's a negative wake-up call. The video.
To the left. Go, go.
In fact, in order to quickly neutralize all these ambush and sabotage groups in Pokrovsk, the command promptly deployed resources from the 155th and the 68th, mechanized and Jaeger brigades, which are defending Pokrovsk. As a result, this threat was eliminated. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, there is one fact reported by deep state analysts. Regrettably, there are also losses on our side, particularly due to friendly fire, because as it turned out, everyone was informed about the sabotage and reconnaissance group, since it was reported almost immediately, even through online resources. It was announced over the weekend that the group had entered Pokrovsk, but at the same time, most of those present at the scene knew about the existence of the DRG, but did not know their roots, who they were, how they were, or where they were. So the analysts at Deep State are absolutely right when they say that news about so-called DRGs should be reported with a cool head in order not to cause confusion, because this general understanding that DRGs exist but no one knows where is exactly what led to the friendly fire incident. And unfortunately, as I understand it, this led to losses, which is what the deep state people are writing about. It's really a lousy story, honestly, that happened with the Russian DRGs entering the southern part of the city. Overall, tactically, this doesn't actually change the situation in any way. That is, the Russians were fighting for Pokrovsk, and they continue to do so. Just as they try to advance towards Zvirov and Pershetravnya, they are still doing that, and the same goes for Shevchenko. The same story applies to Kotlin and Udakhny in the south, where they are trying to break through our defenses in order to reach and cut off the highway. So tactically, nothing is really changing significantly in Pokrovsk, except that, well, the fighting is moving closer to residential areas. Although there are very few reasons or indications to think that the Russians will actually engage in urban combat. Most likely, they will try to cut off logistics, just as they did in Kurakove, just as they did in Avdiivka, rather than conduct urban combat in Pokrovsk. Because in Pokrovsk, in fact, an entire army was lost, an entire Wagner army, due to those extremely exhausting urban advances in Bakhmut. We also lost a lot in Bakhmut, but overall, it is very doubtful that the enemy will actually use this scenario in Pokrovsk as well. For them, cutting off the logistical routes is a much higher priority. There are 3 of them. Well, and this isn't some kind of secret. You can even see it on the map. It's clearly visualized. There are exactly 3 routes that still remain under our control. There used to be 8, even 9, and now only 3 remain. Through Hrisha and through Rodynske, this well and towards Belgorod. These are the 3 routes the Russians are trying to reach. In particular, the most critical issue, probably in a tactical sense, operational tactical sense, will be the situation around Rodynske. If the enemy enters these routes at this settlement, because Rodynske, the occupier, is physically quite close to it, so to speak, and if they enter Rodynske, it would mean a situation of operational encirclement for Myrnohrad. As you can see, essentially with this kind of semi-circle and with only a single road to Myrnohrad from Pokrovsk under fire, this would make the situation here extremely complicated. So if the occupier enters Rodynske, it would be a serious problem. In Myrnohrad, as I said, it's an operational encirclement. Pokrovsk is waiting, facing further destruction, further devastation, and the mass concentration of glide bombs and drones. So the overall trend, the general situation around Pokrovsk is extremely complicated. By the way, what Pokrovsk looks like can also be seen in another video without commentary from a volunteer named Denis Christoph, callsign Dutchman, who travels around and evacuates people from the most hellish spots on the front line. Honor and praise to him for continuing to do all this, even in Pokrovsk, while being under absolute hell. The video I'm about to show is a little over 10 days old, but the very fact is that just 10 days ago, Denis Dutchman was evacuating people from Pokrovsk. The big question is, why didn't these people evacuate earlier? Why are they putting volunteers like this in danger? But it's not for me to say, sitting in a comfortable chair at home in the capital of Ukraine. I mean, I understand that it's not entirely right to make such statements, but overall, the lack of even mandatory evacuation leads to a situation where a lot of people are putting themselves in danger. And in Pokrovsk, the danger is lurking at the highest possible level. Just take a look at this video with all the destruction, the strikes, and what generally happens in Pokrovsk or in any other city when enemy aircraft are carrying out intense attacks.
My husband was killed. There was just a strike. There are casualties among the locals. A man was tragically killed right here, at this very spot. Here are his personal belongings and clothes left behind. Just like that, exactly. Russia is liberating the residents of Pokrovsk. How many were killed? 3. 3 here at the scene, right? 2 were taken away by relatives. 3 civilians were killed. 2 were taken away. And 1 will be where he will be buried in his own yard. We needed to go to that street. I'm physically able. Now we'll go on foot to pick him up. That's how it is. There was a strike on this neighboring house. Now we're picking up people from the geophysical station, 12 of them. It's all good? All right. Here. You need to go this way, this way, this way. Kolya! They ran off to me. It flew by. It's okay. Let's go. We went, let's go. So, we left Pokrovsk. In total, today we have evacuated 17 civilians, successfully evacuated from Pokrovsk, and 1 guinea pig. That's it, we've just arrived in Belgorod.
17 civilians and 1 guinea pig. This is fantastic work being done by the volunteers evacuating people from Pokrovsk. But you saw what the city itself looks like. Well, it's simply a ruin, and the Russians will keep destroying it. They'll keep destroying it.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
So, in a broader sense, the situation around Pokrovsk is not changing. It's not getting better. It's steadily getting worse. The goal is to ensure that this steady deterioration leads, so to speak, to gradual rather than cascading losses in this direction. That's probably exactly the case. One can only, and probably should, outline this in the direction south of Pokrovsk. The enemy continues to press along the entire line up to the Dnipropetrovsk region. In fact, starting from the settlement of Orikove and ending with Novosilka, Zeleny Pol, moving toward the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Here it is. This border, I'll mark it again. The Russians are trying to advance here in order to fully reach the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. The situation is very difficult right now, with an unstable and unclear, ambiguous line of contact in Voskresenka, where our soldiers previously raised the flag. We can see further Russian advances in the area of Oleksiivka and Zeleny Kut. In the open field, the soldiers of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade are holding back the enemy, but its sabotage groups, just like in Pokrovsk, are making their way all the way to Komishuvaka. Overall, the situation along the entire Novopavlivka front is extremely difficult. But recently, at least, we haven't seen any rapid or particularly deep advances by the enemy, which unfortunately did occur a little earlier. As for the overall trend here, I don't know if we can say that it has started to improve, but it has definitely changed. To the north of Pokrovsk, regarding the city of Pokrovsk itself, as I mentioned, our situation in the area of Myrnohrad will become catastrophically difficult if the Russians enter Rodynske, but at the same time, they are also advancing in the direction of Kostiantini. And now we see the complete capture of the settlement of Popiv Yar, and in fact, entry into the settlement of Poltavka, because the next video that is shown actually demonstrates the work of the unmanned systems battalion of the 117th Brigade. The battalion is called Zvirobai, and here we can see how Ukrainian drones, bombers, copters, FPV series striking the fortifications, well, not just fortifications, but also the houses where the enemy is entrenched, where their groups are holed up. This is happening both in the settlement of Popiv Yar and already in Poltavka. Such strikes are taking place there. So it makes sense to verify them specifically there. Therefore, the situation is not among the most favorable, but in particular, we can see that these strikes, which are being carried out by battalions of unmanned systems, a great number of them have been gathered near Pokrovsk. In particular, it is obvious that the Magyar birds are operating here, who report daily on a very high number of enemy distractions and strikes. And drones continue to create what is called a kill zone on the front line. Yesterday, Magyar spoke about it during joint NATO countries exercises in Wiesbaden, Germany. There, the commander of the unmanned systems forces, Magyar, gave a speech. He tried, let's say, to emphasize the right things and open our partners' eyes to what drones are doing to the war, what changes they are already bringing today. Magyar says, you see, I have just one small major star on my shoulder box, but I managed to create a structure that now works like, well, an excellent private enterprise, like a fine-tuned clock, actually destroying the enemy. Today, says Magyar, on our side, there are prospects for creating a kill zone, and not just prospects, it's already a reality. A kill zone for the enemy stretching 20 kilometers, that is from zero, from the spot where our infantryman sits, and 20 kilometers deep. Everything the enemy moves, everything that moves is destroyed. Next, Magyar says there are no such tanks in existence now. Not just armored fighting vehicles. There are no tanks that a Ukrainian drone couldn't destroy. He says, I'm ready to bet any amount you name that Ukrainian drones will destroy absolutely any heavy armored vehicle. That's exactly why infantry needs to be replaced. The replacement should be carried out by ground robotic systems, which now need to take over all logistics on the front line and thus counter the enemy. Because drones are destroying absolutely everything right now, Magyar gave an example. While at one of the NATO military bases, he looked at the security of that base. He looked at how the equipment was set up there and gave his assessment. 4 crews under his command, being 10 kilometers away from the base, could turn that NATO base into a scene straight out of Pearl Harbor in just 15 minutes. The development of this base would have followed the example of Pearl Harbor. That's why, in reality, drones are significantly changing the approaches in this war. And now, as Magyar pointed out, replacing infantry in terms of logistics with ground robotic systems is exactly what needs to happen. This is exactly what, for example, the Kartia Brigade demonstrated yesterday during a logistics mission. They used a ground drone, and in Kartia, many UGVs are specifically used for logistics. So they evacuated, or rather, they delivered logistics supplies. You see, like wood for reinforcing the dugouts. These are necessary actions to constantly reinforce the dugouts during shelling. Now, the drone has completed its logistics mission and moved on. There was a report over the radio that there was a seriously wounded soldier, 300, and the drone went to evacuate him. In total, it covered 32 kilometers, 16 one way and 16 back, and it evacuated our comrade. Because now it's starting to feel like drones are becoming comrades to people. It was clear that using traditional methods, it would have been extremely difficult to evacuate such a wounded soldier. He had a wounded leg, a serious injury, and so slowly and carefully along forest paths and field roads, with the utmost caution, the drone successfully delivered the soldier to the medevac, which ultimately saved his life. Here you can see this footage. And this is exactly what Magyar is talking about. Other legendary commanders like Kirilo Veres are also talking about this, that we need to switch to UGVs, replacing infantrymen with them. In terms of medevac, in terms of logistics, yes, that's absolutely true. And there's one more thing that Magyar mentioned while he was in Wiesbaden at the Land Euro 2025 training. He said that right now our unmanned systems forces in particular face a very important task to create a towering wall of drones. He says much higher than the Great Wall of China, one that would destroy enemy Shaheds right at the front line, so they wouldn't penetrate deep into our territory in large numbers. So right now, this is exactly the main task facing our drone units on the front line. Meanwhile, while we are talking about anti-aircraft drones, about destroying and creating such a Chinese wall of defense against enemy Shaheds, the enemy, unfortunately, is increasingly mastering the technology of anti-aircraft drones, at least when it comes to targeting our reconnaissance drones. Unfortunately, they learn this from us. More and more often, we see footage like this where our reconnaissance wings are being targeted. This was emphasized yesterday in particular by Serhiy Flesh, an expert in radio communications, radio technologies, and unmanned technologies. He said that right now, the ones we see suffering the most in the videos are the Leleka, Gory Shark, and Fly Eye. All of these are our reconnaissance drones, and this was inevitable because the enemy realized that this approach is effective. But we, despite being a year ahead of them, as Flash writes, for some reason did not develop or create our own countermeasures against such anti-aircraft drones. In other words, we should always expect that the enemy will acquire them just as Ukrainian forces did. And according to Flash, drone manufacturers should have been thinking about what to do and how to counter these anti-aircraft drones. Actually, now we need to detect compact radars that provide the 3D understanding of where the drone is. And in this way, the crew of the enemy's anti-aircraft drone detects our reconnaissance UAV. Well, all of this needs to be worked on. What does the enemy do in such situations when they start to lose in terms of quality? They very quickly ramp up their numbers. And so in terms of quantity, the number of anti-aircraft drones now deployed against at least our reconnaissance wings is something to be expected. We should anticipate that the Russians will act exactly this way. While our reconnaissance wings are still operating and while they're still working on developing an anti-drone defense system for them, still our intelligence is even operating on enemy territory. Yesterday, the General Staff showed how, with the help of our drone, a strike was adjusted. I'm not sure, maybe some kind of missiles. Which ones exactly? I don't know which missiles. Maybe they were drones, maybe they were missiles, maybe they were missile drones. In short, something that struck the enemy in the Belgorod region. And what exactly was hit? It was an S-300P surface-to-air missile system and a NIBO-M radar complex, which were located next to this system. Also, another radar station, the 5N 66 minutes NATO classification, it's called Big Bird, this radar station as well. And finally, another piece of news in this chronological overview of today's map, because objectively there's not much to add to the map right now, since frankly there are very few events happening at all on the front, and this is largely thanks to our units, including our drone units, but the greatest credit goes to our infantrymen who are doing truly phenomenal things by holding this front. However, in terms of long range, means where the missiles or drones yesterday evening, a fire broke out at the Millerovo airfield that's in the Rostov region. It's one of the airfields used by Russian aviation. and in fact, it was hit quite spectacularly. I think today we'll hear more news about this strike. And by the way, I'll report on it as well, just as I'll share the video featuring the Khartia fighters evacuating their comrades using the Tor 800 ground robotic system. You can find me, friends, on my Telegram channel. In the description of this video, you'll find a link to that Telegram community, which I personally manage, oversee, and run. So join in and subscribe. I would be glad if right now, after finishing this review, you go to my Telegram channel and watch this video from Khartia again, because it truly deserves attention for how UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles, are changing approaches to warfare. Well, that's all. That's where I'll put a full stop. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. All the best. And until we meet again, talk to you soon.